Hi, and welcome to Behind the Scenes An Artist's Journey, where we take an in-depth look at different careers in performing arts. My name is Greg Lauer. I'm the Director of Education at the Appell Center for the Performing Arts here in York, Pennsylvania. And today we are pleased to have Dr. Christopher Cicconi with us, Director of Bands and Orchestras at Towson University. Hi, Chris.
How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show.
How are you guys dealing with COVID and quarantine?
Well, there's three parts of it, all equally as difficult. One is music online has been very difficult, and so we've been looking for ways to do things. Because at Towson, I teach conducting,
Right.
so we've had to adapt the curriculum a lot as far as how we teach conducting, because there's no live ensembles to work with. A major part of that curriculum is kids conducting groups and doing air detection and feedback, and so we've adapted that a bunch. I've got 15 kids that are student teaching right now, which that looks like a whole different situation. The Baltimore County, Harford County teachers and Anne Arundel teachers have been really great with adapting ways that the kids can drop in and do some virtual teaching, so they get their state required hours in front of students, so they can get their teaching license. I couldn't even imagine student teaching with this going on.
Right.
And then the other part of it, obviously, is the band and orchestra piece. So we've been doing a lot of wellness checks with them, making sure they're okay, they're keeping up with their classes, telling them I'm thinking about them. We do a lot of guided listening activities as well. So it's I hate not seeing them, but I'm glad that we have the technology available that I can check in with them and see their faces.
And how are Ashley and the kids doing?
Well, that's part 2 and 3 to the to this. And so my 6-year-old is in Zoom meetings pretty much all day from 9 to about 2:30. And so my wife actually she teaches at the same school, at the McDonough School, and they've actually done really great with this distance learning project. It's actually quite amazing what I've seen them do. But they work at the same time, synchronously. So I'm helping Nico, the 6-year-old, get through a lot of his assignments and making sure he's on Zoom at all these different particular times, because he still has PE, he still has library, he's got music, he has his piano lesson, morning meeting, closing circle. Just yesterday, actually, I was the mystery reader for his class, so I was really excited to do that. And so doing that with him, it's been fun. It's been challenging. And my wife, Ashley, has been doing all of her music activities and teaching online. And I can't forget the fact that I also have a 2.5-year-old running around that we have to make sure that he's being engaged and he's doing things constructive too, as opposed to just watching TV, which we try not to let him do. So he's been very, very, very creative, all the way to the nth degree of figuring out how to get the Oreo cookies off the top shelf in the pantry.
I was going to say, for anyone who follows Chris on social media, you will know that Jackson can find cookies wherever they are located.
Yep. And he got it. I set up a secret camera to try to figure out how he does it. But he's been pretty clever. He knows where I put the camera, so he always hides it before he goes in. So not only do I have to figure out how he got the cookies off the top shelf, I have to figure out then where he put my phone that was recording him.
So Chris, just for our viewers, I'm just going to give a little bit of background on you, and then we're going to talk a little bit about your career and how you've gotten to where you are. So currently you're the Director of Bands and Orchestras at Towson University in Towson, Maryland, the conductor of the Hunt Valley Symphony Orchestra, the Chesapeake Youth Symphony Orchestra, New England Music Camp, the Chesapeake Winds, and the Young Victorian Theater Company. You also serve as an adjudicator and clinician for the festivals of music, as well as for many different festivals all across the U.S. You're a teaching artist for the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra Orc Kids program, and then coordinator for the State Solo and Ensemble Festival for the Maryland Music Educators Association. And a huge congratulations recently to the president-elect of the Maryland Band Directors Association.
Thank you. Yes, that's a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff, as well as countless national guest conducting and speaking appearances at different festivals. And several music arrangement publications and transcriptions, including which we just saw a second ago, the band music handbook.
Yep.
So
It's currently
um,
holding my computer at the right level.
you got your doctorate in instrumental conducting from the University of Miami, master's in education from Arizona State University, and bachelor's in music ed from Youngstown State University. So
Correct.
quite a pedigree and quite an amazing career, which is still going strong, and who knows what the future holds. So,
Sure.
so tell us where. Let's rewind the wheel back as far as you're willing to take it. Where did you first get started in music when you were young?
Well, I was in fourth grade, and there was I lived in Struthers, Ohio, a small suburb of Youngstown. My father was a steel worker, and there was a little music program at Struthers High School, and I wanted to pick up the saxophone. And so took lessons, a few lessons. It was interesting because lessons at that time were, I think my dad paid $4 an hour for lessons. I know. And so I loved it. And so right after that, we moved to Austintown, Ohio. And that's where I met my middle school band director, Mr. Bill Racy, and I was in the Frankel Middle School Band, saxophone all 4 years. And it's interesting, a little bit of a funny story. As I continued my growth as a saxophone player, I kind of got worse at it as the years went on. So by the time then I I left 8th grade, I auditioned for the top band in my high school program as a saxophone player. And it's my high school band director, Larry Snell, who was a huge inspiration, and had passed not long ago. He saw something and he's like, you're a great saxophone player. Why don't you try the tuba? And so I came home from my lesson that day with the tuba, and he hit the nail on the head. I picked up that tuba and I ran with it, and it I just caught on. I feel like it was the instrument that I was supposed to play. And so I played tuba all through high school. I was my high school drum major in the marching band. Loved every second of it. And so I always knew I wanted to teach, just didn't know what I was good enough to teach or what I think I would be most successful for my kids as far as teaching. And then halfway through high school, I realized, and I asked Mr. Snell, I'm like, can I do this? And he said, you'd be fantastic at it. And so I went to what I feel is one of the finest music ed programs in the country when I went to Youngstown State to do my undergraduate degree there in music ed. And while I was there, the experiences I had there were invaluable. I got to play in the band. I got to play in the symphony orchestra. Steve Gage to this day still remains a very positive influence in my life, like he is with all of his kids that have gone through there. And so while I was there, there's a funny story that between my second and third year, I was selected as one of the tuba players in the Aspen Music Festival. Mm-hmm. And I was really excited to go. And I went there, and I got assigned some cool stuff to do. And it was the first time ever playing with an orchestra of like that magnitude. And it was funny because Alan Gilbert was the conductor of one of the groups who was with the New York Philharmonic, but his career was just starting to take off. And I got assigned to Dvorak 9, which I know the piece really well. We actually did an arrangement of it in marching band and in concert band. So I was really excited to do that. And I go to the first rehearsal and I get my part and I'm like, all right. So I look in the first movement and there's no notes for the tuba, tacit. Like, all right. So I get to the second movement and there's 14 notes, 7 at the beginning and 7 at the end. Pianissimo, doubled in the bass trombone. I'm like, all right. Then I look at the third movement, no notes. And I'm like, well, I know everyone knows the fourth movement. This is going to be great. No notes in the fourth movement for the tuba. And we were playing and I couldn't quite play the chorale soft enough. So it was funny. One day I kind of like didn't play it. I kind of like faked it just to see what would happen. And I guess the balance was perfect. So I ended up not playing a single note for that whole piece, all 45 minutes of it. It was a great experience, and working under such amazing conductors was something that changed my life because after that time, I wanted to be up in front of the group and having that experience of working with a large group of musicians in conducting and mostly educating too. And so I came back that summer and talked to Dr. Gage. I'm like, I really want to do this, and this is something I've become extremely passionate about. And so he put me on another path and helped me with my application for Arizona State University. And at ASU, I was a young graduate assistant under Gary Hill, another really important person in my musical and personal life. When I was there, I got to do everything that was conducting. I worked with the bands a little bit. I worked with the orchestra a little bit. I conducted a full-scale opera. I worked with the marching band and loved it. And so after that, I really wanted to start my teaching career. And not many things were open in the state of Arizona, but there was one small school, which was called Coronado Elementary School out in Higley, Arizona. And it was the only job I can find. And I applied for that job. I got that job, and it was split between two schools, Coronado and Power Ranch, which you would see on my resume there. And there was no program there at first. I mean, I had like 6 kids in my first group, but I remember very vividly calling my father, and this is something I'm not ashamed to share. But I was bummed. I'm like, I just got my master's degree, and like, and then I have 6 kids in my first band, and he got on my case. He's like, those kids deserve the best. They deserve your best, and you need to give them your best. And he's like, don't call me back until you're doing that. And it was what I needed, and I sunk my heart and soul into that, which was then Power Ranch Elementary School, into that band program, and it grew. I mean, it went from 5 or 6 kids that first year. I mean, we had hundreds of kids by the time I was done with their. After I think 7 or 8 years, I was there. And it was phenomenal. And I keep in touch with those kids all the time. I have a lot of really close parent friends. I mean, one of my very best friends in the whole world is still out there. And so during that time, though, towards the end of my career there, I saw some of my friends doing this. And I'm like, I really want to teach students how to become music educators. I want to get into that. Something I've always been passionate about, but I didn't have quite the educational background to do that yet. So I left that job there. It was hard. It was gut wrenching, because what we built there was something that was extremely special, and it's something I'll never forget. I love those kids, and I've gone back a few times to see their commencements and all of that, and it's been great. So then I applied at the University of Miami because I needed a doctorate degree to teach in higher ed.
Right.
So I went down there and I met Gary Green, and again, I've worked with such amazing mentors. And Tom Sleeper, I would be remiss. I would include him too, because he was also a very important part of my musical growth there too. And he was the director of Orchestras. So I got my degree there after 3 years, and then started applying for jobs. But the job that actually stuck out to me most was a high school job. And I taught at the Pinecrest School in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And it was everything that I wanted. It was an amazing job with amazing administrative support, great kids, great band program. So I was there at Pinecrest for 3 years, and same thing. I became really attached to my kids there, and I knew that teaching was what I was supposed to be doing. But at the end of the 3rd year, along with some family things that we were going with, I was looking to move closer to my father, who was ill at the time. The job at Towson University opened. I applied. I went through that process, and I ended up receiving a contract 5 years ago to come teach at Towson. And it's been, ever since then, it's been a treat and a pleasure to be able to do what I get to do there, because it encompasses everything I think that's important to me about the arts. I get to conduct a fantastic symphonic band. I get to conduct a fantastic symphony orchestra. I mean, we were right in the middle of Mahler 1 when this happened. But another great part of that is I'm an assistant professor of music education. And so I do a lot of work in teacher preparation, in helping get these young college students ready to go out and deal with and teach and work with all of everything that is music education in today's society. And so I teach conducting, and I teach a lot of other things. Like we work on resume building, we work on entrepreneurship. I get a lot of my supervisor friends to come in and talk to them about interview techniques and everything. And so my education has brought me to this point, and I couldn't ask for anything better. My TU kids, just like my Pinecrest kids and just like my Power Ranch kids, um, are near and dear to me, and they're my children. And so right now I'm working on 15 of them getting jobs, which I think 4 of them currently do, which is great. So I don't know. That's a
Oh,
long.
that's okay. I mean, I think it's great to do it all at once because it takes us on that journey for you. And one of my questions was going to be, I know my career has taken a few different side roads from from where I started, but what was that moment that you had a career transition? Or, you were a performer and then you're like, I really think I should be a conductor and educator. And so.
Well, I don't want to. The Dvorak story is funny, but I don't want to leave it like it wasn't that. It was just like what was so special about that is the fact, I didn't play a single note for 45 minutes, but then I got to watch the conductor actually rehearse and put a piece together. Yeah. I got to see what went through that, what the process was. And I didn't actually play on the other pieces too. The other thing was, I think the Beethoven Violin Concerto and Overture to Ruslan and Ludmila, which there's no tuba on any of that concert.
Right.
But it was interesting. It's something like Alan Gilbert too. I mean, are you kidding me? And so I got to watch that process happen, and I wanted to do that. And I remember telling my dad, I'm like, I want to do this. And he's like, do it. He's like, just be really good at it. And so I've worked all my career on trying to give my students and put someone in front of them that they know is working really hard for them.
Chris, I ask everybody this. So, and we've heard some really great stories on both ends. Give us your most memorable performance and a funny performance story if you've got one.
My most memorable performance. It's, this is, so I would have to say that I'll never forget. There's a lot of emotion that was wrapped up into this. And so I'm going to try to hold my composure to the best as possible. 2 years ago, on May 5th, my father passed away. He had a 7-year battle with lymphoma. And so he went into hospice care around the end of April, the beginning of May. And so being at TU has been great. For one thing, I get to go home. I went home every weekend to visit him and to be with him. And he knew how special my kids are to me. We had just done Marriage of Figaro, the whole thing. And like I said, I was going back and forth in between. But then the band played a symphony by David Maslanka, which is his 8th symphony. And the kids knew what was going on. I wear my emotions on my sleeve with my kids, and they'll tell you that. I mean, it's not uncommon in a Cicconi rehearsal for him to get emotional and have tears and all of that. And so that Maslanka performance with those kids at that time, which in the end of it, as soon as it ended, my father passed away just over 24 hours later. I finished the performance, and the kids knew, we all knew how emotional and how wrapped up we all were in that production. We were all very emotional with everything. And so after that was over, I hugged them all. I told them all I love them. And I went back to, the very next morning, I raced back to Ohio, and it was finals week. So I knew I was going to spend the rest of my dad's time with him when I got back there. And he ended up, passing away that next night. But everything leading up to that was I'll never forget. I remember everything about that concert. And how proud he was of me, what we were doing there at TU, and what the kids were accomplishing. And so that's, I would say, as far as memorable. And then the kids knew what happened, and I shared with them that he had passed, and they knew the situation. While I was gone, they recorded Irish Tune from a County Dairy and sent it to me as a homage to him, which was, so it was a lot of emotion at the end of that. And so, it's just, kids are amazing. band kids, orchestra kids, their hearts are the biggest I've ever seen. And I work every day to repay them for those moments. And so that was probably the most emotional performance that I've ever been a part of. Probably the funniest one. Um, it's, I don't know if it's funny. We were doing, when I was a graduate student at ASU, we were doing Cosi. And it was my first attempt at conducting opera, which is terrifying. It's the most terrifying thing in the whole world. And I forget the scene, and it was like Dorabella and Fiordaliga were arguing over a utensil, and they let go of the utensil, and it was a big old butter knife, and it flew into the pit, and it like knocked an instrument out of one of the kids' hands, like right in the middle of this aria that they were doing. And it like we all just sort of looked at each other, and I just kept going. I'm like, and we recovered, but it was like one of those things where I tell them, I'm like, never underestimate like what could quite happen, because that was something. And like to see, it was one of those slow motion things where I was just like,
Saw it coming.
and I didn't catch it, of course. And I looked down at the violin player, and she looked at me. I'm like, and it was the concertmaster, and said the show went on, and they recovered really well. But like the whole there was a collective like, and then it was fine. But I think I'm trying to think of other funny. We've had a lot of funny rehearsal moments.
Yeah.
Where my baton has flown through the air unintentionally and things like that. But that was probably the funniest thing, only because no one was hurt and no instrument was hurt, and the piece didn't fall apart. There was a loud bang, but that was about it.
You'll have to talk to Ginger and have her tell you her brass quintet gondola story. That was floating in the water. That was a pretty funny moment.
Oh, I don't have that. The only other funny thing that happened is when I was at Aspen, horn player with the American Brass Quintet is at Wakefield.
Mm-hmm.
He was our coach, and we were doing the last movement of the Malcolm Arnold brass quintet piece, which is every instrument starts with the same lick,
right?
And the tuba doesn't last. And it's funny because he was really he's like, whatever articulation the trumpet does, we all have to copy. Whatever so-and-so does, we all have to copy. Well, when it started, the first trumpet played and totally cacked the beginning note. And so the second trumpet unwillingly cacked it by accident too. then the horn comes in and cacked it. So I'm hearing all this going on. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to be the only one that plays this right. The trombone comes in, cacks the note. So here comes me. I'm like, I'm going to crush it. And I completely botched it, just like everybody else. And so he came up to us after. He's like, I didn't mean if someone makes a mistake, we should all copy that. And this is like a professional horn player telling us this, but it was music-wise, it was kind of funny because none of us had meant to do it. So, but hey, we listened.
Chris, tell us if you had to pick one person in your life who was your most influential teacher or mentor, who would that be?
It's my dad. It's 100%. I mean, I've had amazing teachers. My middle school band director was fantastic, and my high school director put me on the path. Steve Gage inspired me to be everything that I've wanted to be in my professional career. But my dad is the one that has taught me those intangibles that I try to teach my kids. If you're going to do something, like do it really well, because whoever you're doing that for deserves your best. He taught me a lot about discipline. No one has ever worked harder in their life than my father did. And there was one point where I wasn't sure, and not a lot of people know this, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my summer. And he's like, I need you to figure out, you're going to be a productive member of society. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And it was between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college. He's like, all right, fine. You haven't decided? You're now employed at the LTV steel mill in Warren, Ohio. And I'm like, I don't want, he's like, it wasn't a question. And so I went and worked. I was a steel worker, and I did the coal handling thing, and I did all of that stuff for and it was 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And I learned a lot. I can't even tell you the intangibles that I learned there about hard work and dedication and safety. And at the end of that summer, he's like, what are you doing next summer? And I'm like, I understand. I got it. And so everything that he's done, like how he raised me. I try to raise my boys that way.
Yeah.
How my work ethic, uh, even silly things like being to work on time. Uh, you know, my parents, brought me up that way. My father, like he was very strict with me. When I turned 21, for example, he's like, you're an adult and you'll make your choices, but you will be at work on time the next day, no matter what. And so uh, I still have yet in my entire career, I've called in sick once. And so he has been the biggest influence with everything that I do. And that transcends into the music world as well.
So, Chris, what advice would you give to middle, high school students, or even college students who are wanting to pursue a career in the arts, be it in conducting and performance? What advice would you give them, and also like advice to help lay healthy foundations in their studies?
Um, I think the most important thing that I can leave with you or tell you, don't let anyone tell you you can't do it. And if they do tell you you can't do it, use that as fuel to do it even better. I've been told every once in a while, not by my friends or my family, but every once in a while, someone's like, "Oh, you can't do that," or "You know what, you can't do." And for me, it goes back to my dad. Uh, that just fueled me to do it and to try to do it even better, or even with a more sense of resolve. Uh, if you're a high school kid and you want to be a high school band director, go do it. Find the things that you need to do along the way to set you up for that. So what I like to give advice for is, like, if there's someone in your life that you aspire to be. And so once I got to college, I wanted to be like my college band director. I wanted to do what he did. And so I went online and I looked up his resume. I talked to him a bunch. I'm like, what did you do here? How did you do this? Go find them, and talk to them, have them serve as a mentor, ask them what they did to get to the spot. I have kids do that a lot, especially now. Actually, the one thing that technology has really helped with is it's been able to give me the opportunity to talk to my kids a lot more.
Yeah.
So they'll drop by for virtual office hours, and they'll say, like, listen, I want to do what you're doing. What do I have to do that? What
Right.
do I have to do to get to where you are? It's hard work. And the stuff that you do along the way, which I was a middle school band director, I was a high school band director, I've done a lot of freelancing things. I do that to the very best of my ability, knowing my limitations, being able to push those limitations. But a lot of people will say, well, I'll just go teach middle school for a few years, and good, but then do it really well.
Mhm.
Because in the end, those kids deserve, and that's what my dad told me, they deserve the best.
Yeah.
Okay. And that needs to be you. They choose to play an instrument. You need to choose to be the best teacher you can for them and give them the best possible experience. And so uh, that would be my biggest advice. Like, don't let anyone tell you no, you can't do it, because you can't. And I'm not trying to sound like a motivational speaker here, but I think that's something important, because it's easy then to get down on yourself and be like, oh no, I can't. You really can. And I've seen that. A lot of my friends and a lot of the people that I attach myself to have that kind of drive. And then don't give up on it. Keep at it. Uh, Use your resources, talk to people, interview people, and figure out what they did to get there, and then go do it. You have to put yourself out there. You have to volunteer. You have to take chances. I took a huge chance leaving that middle school position. I was tenured. It was the machine was rolling. They were playing great music. I loved those kids like no other. But I knew what I wanted to do, so I left a good paying job with a lot of freelance work, a ton of private teaching I was doing out in Arizona. I went from that to to making $0, because I knew I wanted to be a college band director, and I knew the path that I needed to take to get to that, and I wouldn't let anyone or anything get in my way of that. And so that's what I'm telling them. Figure out those things to do. Start, if you're a college student, start building that resume of, like, if you want to be a high school band director, are you volunteering at local marching band camps? Are you teaching private lessons? Are you offering to go into high schools and do sectionals? do all of those things. When I was at the University of Miami, I wanted to teach at the college level. So I worked at Barry University, which I loved. I taught private lessons to college students there. I taught conducting at Nova Southeast University. And I did a lot of those things to sort of build my resume and my conducting, what's the word I'm looking for, profile to sort of highlight those things.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking
Sure.
the time to join us today. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we can all get out of this COVID craziness soon.
Yes.
Have you guys get out of the house a little bit at least?
Yeah, we're going to go hiking right after this, so I'm looking forward to that. That's been the one thing we've been doing a lot of.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Sure. Absolutely. Happy to help. Thanks for having me.
Talk to you soon.
See you.